The true strength of a system is revealed not when everything works, but when its biggest failure cannot destroy it. February 2014. Nearly 850,000 Bitcoin had vanished. The world's largest Bitcoin exchange had suddenly gone offline. Hundreds of thousands of users feared their money was gone forever. Bitcoin's price plunged. News headlines around the world declared that the cryptocurrency experiment had finally come to an end. To many people, it looked like Bitcoin itself had failed. But that wasn't what actually happened. A company had collapsed. The Bitcoin network never stopped. Every 10 minutes, another block was added. Another transaction was confirmed. Another chapter of Bitcoin's story began. To understand why, we have to go back to the company that once controlled almost the entire Bitcoin market. Long before it became the world's largest Bitcoin exchange, Mt. Gox had nothing to do with cryptocurrency. In 2007, it was created as a website for trading cards from the game Magic, The Gathering. Its name even stood for Magic, the Gathering online exchange. But as Bitcoin began attracting attention, the website found a completely different purpose. In 2010, it was transformed into a Bitcoin exchange. A year later, French developer Marc Carpelles took over the business. Bitcoin was still a tiny market. There were very few exchanges, very little competition, and demand was growing faster than anyone expected. Within just a few years, Mt. Gox became the gateway to Bitcoin for people around the world. At its peak, it handled around 70% of all Bitcoin trading volume globally. For many newcomers, Mt. Gox wasn't just an exchange, it was Bitcoin. And that would soon become a dangerous misunderstanding. As Bitcoin's popularity exploded, Mt. Gox became the center of a rapidly growing industry. New users arrived every day. Trading volumes reached levels that few had imagined just a few years earlier. But behind the scenes, the company was struggling to keep up. Its infrastructure had been built for a much smaller operation. Security practices were inconsistent. Internal controls were weak. Over the years, the exchange experienced technical failures, security incidents, and operational challenges that gradually eroded its resilience. Customers sometimes faced delays when withdrawing funds. Confidence began to weaken, yet many users stayed. There were few alternatives. Mt. Gox had become too important to fail, or so people believed. But technology doesn't reward confidence, it rewards preparation. And while Bitcoin's decentralized network continued operating exactly as designed, the company built around it was becoming increasingly fragile. The cracks were already there. Most people simply couldn't see them. In early 2014, something strange began to happen. Customers trying to withdraw their Bitcoin found themselves waiting longer than usual. Some transactions were delayed, others never arrived. At first, many believed it was only a temporary technical problem. Mt. Gox released statements blaming software issues and transaction processing errors. But confidence was fading. Every day, more users demanded answers. Then, without warning, withdrawals were suspended. Days later, the website itself went offline. Behind closed doors, the company was facing a crisis far larger than anyone had imagined. Mt. Gox announced that approximately 850,000 Bitcoin were missing. It was one of the largest financial losses in the history of digital assets. For hundreds of thousands of customers, their Bitcoin had simply disappeared, and with it, their trust. On February 28, 2014, Mt. Gox filed for bankruptcy in Japan. The company admitted that hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin under its control were missing. The announcement spread across the world within hours. Investors rushed to sell. Bitcoin's price dropped sharply. Financial newspaper questioned whether digital currencies had any future at all. To millions of people watching from the outside, Mt. Gox and Bitcoin were the same thing. If the largest exchange had collapsed, then surely Bitcoin itself had failed. It was an understandable conclusion, but it was also a dangerous misunderstanding, because while panic dominated the headlines, somewhere else, something remarkable was happening. The Bitcoin network continued producing blocks exactly every 10 minutes, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding it. In the weeks after Mt. Gox collapsed, one fact became impossible to ignore. Bitcoin itself had never stopped working. The blockchain continued to process transactions. New blocks continued to appear roughly every 10 minutes. Thousands of computers around the world kept validating the network exactly as they had before. The failure wasn't inside Bitcoin. It was inside one company that had been trusted to hold other people's coins. That distinction changed the way the industry thought about security. Investors began asking a different question. Instead of, "Is Bitcoin safe?" they asked, "Who is holding my Bitcoin?" It was a simple question, but it changed everything. Hardware wallets became more popular. Exchanges invested more heavily in security, audits, and proof of reserves over the following years. One lesson echoed throughout the entire Bitcoin community: not your keys, not your coins. Mt. Gox had failed. The protocol had not. Mt. Gox became one of the darkest chapters in Bitcoin's history. Hundreds of thousands of people lost access to their coins. Confidence was shaken. The entire cryptocurrency industry was forced to confront a difficult reality. Building a revolutionary technology was not enough. Protecting it was just as important. In the years that followed, exchanges invested heavily in stronger security. Cold storage became an industry standard for protecting customer assets. Independent security audits became more common. Regulators around the world began paying closer attention to cryptocurrency exchanges. Investors also changed. Many chose to store their own Bitcoin rather than leaving it on an exchange. A simple phrase spread throughout the community: not your keys, not your coins. Mt. Gox had exposed the risks of trusting a single company, but it also reminded the world why Bitcoin had been created in the first place: a network that doesn't depend on trust in any one institution. That lesson would shape the next generation of Bitcoin. Mt. Gox collapsed, but Bitcoin didn't. Because Bitcoin was never a company. It was never a website. It was never a CEO. It was a network designed to keep running, even when the companies built around it failed. The collapse of Mt. Gox wasn't the end of Bitcoin. It was the beginning of a more mature industry, and the next test was already on the horizon.